Welcome to Eternal Journey, the podcast.
Greetings to all my knights and padawans out there. You are listening to Eternal Journey, the podcast that talks about all things eternal with a focus in limited play. I'm your host, Jedi, and this week on episode 68, we're going to be talking about Who's the Beatdown. This is a very crucial skill set to have when playing any kind of strategic card game, as we will talk about later on in the show. But of course, I want to introduce my good friends. Joining me on the line is John Holio. How you doing, buddy?
I'm great, Jedi. How you doing, man?
Doing all right. Been a good draft week. Been kicking it with my friends like you guys and having a good time. And I had some fun with some what felt like semi-whack deck. That was your brew. We'll talk about later on in Constructed Corner, but ended up being very solid.
Semi-whack top 64 deck?
Yeah, exactly. There goes user pilot error. Then we also have our other good friend, Alex. How you doing, buddy?
What's up, my friends? How's it going?
Alex, what it do?
Yeah, draft hype. Alex is in top 20. What?
Yeah, I mean, it's a seesaw. It's like up and down, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think I saw you at a record high the other day.
Yeah, just cracked top 20, and then the loss like immediately puts you back out like half, 25. It's hard to stay up there, but
Whatever. Congrats anyway.
Yeah,
everybody.
Not easy, man. Especially right now with so many competitive drafters in the Eternal world right now. What let's talk about that for a second though. What made you want to try to push for top 20 this month?
If I do top 20 this month and next month, then I would get the bye for the draft championship, whatever the bye is. It's probably just like, I don't even think we know.
I think somebody said it was you get to skip all of day one.
I think that might be it. I it's hard to keep these things straight. I don't know off the top of my head, but yeah. I mean, even the 3 wins that they gave for this last series of events turned out to be so big. So I mean, I don't know. No matter what it is, I think it'll be a pretty big deal. So yeah, go for it, man.
Yeah,
I'm nothing to lose, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all we gotta do is do what you already enjoy doing, so why not, right?
Absolutely.
I would definitely hit up some of the players to stay at the top, though, like Hats on Lamps and Extinction and Apache, Isomorphic, to find out like if they do a last minute spurt at the end to make sure they keep it. I don't know. I know it's like that Constructed, where the last day, if you want to stay in the top, you have to keep playing. But I don't know if it's that way with draft or not. So I would check in with them just to make sure.
Yeah, good call.
All right. Moving on to some announcements. Twitch.tv/Jedi_EJ. That's where you can catch myself, John, and Alex all hanging out, having a good time, doing some limited, doing some constructed, doing all kinds of things. I almost feel like a eternal variety streamer. But yeah, we do a lot of limited. We still do. It's still the biggest thing we do in this channel. But do some other things. Come hang out. Talk to us about your drafts. The other day, we actually got MLNTN to hop in on Discord, and we helped him with his draft, which was a lot of fun. And yeah, it's just very informative, very fun. Hang out, positivity everywhere. We have such a great community. As a matter of fact, I'll talk about it here in a minute on the shoutouts. But if you can't catch us live, always catch us at YouTube/EternalJourney. So, or youtube.com/EternalJourney, where, yeah, a bunch of videos go up there. A lot of drafts from the Twitch stream, as well as a bunch of YouTube exclusive content on there. So check it out when you can't catch us live. And then shout out, man. So we only have one new member today in the Jedi Order, which is Chef Barbie. Thank you so much for joining the Jedi Order. But I do want to give a shout out to an extended amount of people. We had another hype train reach level 4 yesterday's stream, and I gotta say it was God, the feel goods about that, just across the board, the kind of positivity that's radiating from the community, from chat, back and forth. Like, I just feel unbelievably grateful to be a part of this. And as kind of like a little bit, I don't know how to, I don't want to say a reward or like kind of paying it forward or whatnot. I end up throwing on like one of my sharper get-ups and a new bowler I picked up and chat ended up liking it. Just I don't know. I felt like I wanted to give back something. I couldn't think of anything like right off the top. I was gonna spin fire, but I'm like, not indoors. Like I've done it indoors, but on carpet. So,
yeah, probably a good idea.
well, it depends. Like if I use alcohol, I could probably spin it indoors pretty safely. But I actually like to use camp fuel because it just burns brighter. But yeah, that's not exactly the safest thing to do indoors. But anywho, I digress. So yeah, I just want to give a shout out to everyone that. Seafood Danny gave me a huge raid yesterday. Welcome back. They're back to streaming now. Very competitive player. Yeah,
he beat me in the top 64 this weekend. Congrats on the great run, Danny.
I didn't want to mention it, but yeah,
I don't mind.
All right, cool. Yeah, congrats on a deep run in the recent ECQ, which I guess I might as well mention it now. John, we're going to be talking about John's deck in Constructed Corner because John Holio made top 64 in this weekend's ECQ. So congratulations to John. Shout out.
Thanks.
Woot.
Congrats, bud. Good
woot
job.
woot.
Yep.
My internet stayed on the whole time.
Cooperated.
Yeah, lucky.
Yep, and it goes, I just want to go ahead and tip the hat to the fact that he made it in with his own brew. So that's always, nothing wrong with that ducking, nothing wrong with brewing with the team, nothing wrong with all the other ways you can get to top 64. But, it's always nice that when you can make it in with your own creation, and John definitely did that. So
feels extra cool.
I agree. But all right, going back to the hype train. All right, these great members of the Jedi Order were gifting out subs, contributing bits, cheering up and hyping up chat, and just being all around amazing and gifting to the channel. So give some shout outs to Better Up, Extinction, Titus and Blossom, E Moneybags, John Holio, MLNTN, Batteries ECG, Enroush1, Mercurio Blue, and POTUS for Prison. Thank you guys so much for just the ongoing support and amazingness that has made this community what it is, and why I couldn't imagine streaming any other game or just I don't know. Like that's why I enjoy streaming so much. I'm just kicking it with my friends, Maybe one day, maybe periodically, we'll do like a special show or just streams where we'll have like as many people as they want in Discord and just have like a gang of people chatting up Discord while we're streaming. So
that'd be fun.
Yeah, I mean, shoot, dude.
Nick kind of does that on his streams sometimes. It's fun. It can get a little hard to hear some people sometimes, but it's worth it.
I could believe that. I could definitely believe that. I don't know. It's a lot of fun. I mean, shoot. There was one stream we had this week where the first 40 minutes was just about everyone talking about the games we grew up playing, like going down memory lane with GoldenEye and WCW versus ECW and Sega games and Commodore 64. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. I was like, oh yeah, Eternal. We'll play that too. So, right. Let's go do it with our shout outs. Just once again, we have a great community. You guys are amazing. Thank you for all that you do. And all the ongoing, of course, as always, all the ongoing supporters of the show, of the stream, of this podcast. You guys are incredible. Definitely had a couple of people already hit me up this month saying that they hit up Masters for the first time, and even Diamond in Draft for the first times ever. Hit Masters in Gauntlet. Like, man, so many people are getting better listening to the show, and that's exactly why we do it. So pat on the back to both you, John, and you, Alex, for being a part of this, man. Like, I'm sure you guys don't get enough credit. You guys are just as much contributors to the show and to people improving both on the Discord and here. So thank you
thanks,
guys.
man. Yeah, it feels good to hear that. I mean, I'm content, just talking Eternal with you and Alex here. But I mean, every time we hear something like that, that's super rewarding. And yeah,
I mean,
feels good.
The feeling's mutual because it helps me get better. I'm sure it helps Jedi to get better. And John, I mean, all this talk about Eternal is like,
yeah, me too.
It's beneficial to us as well. So it's fun to do for sure.
Well, I quote, "I'm here to help us get better, but primarily me." End quote. Mostly me. Sorry.
I do like that quote.
But Yeah, I mean, dude, it really, when you think about it, think about how many people don't draft because they think it's too hard or it's too intimidating, right? And I totally understand that. And to hear so many people giving it a shot, I mean, granted, I'm sure the free draft tickets helps kind of encourage that, but still,
True.
like, it's still pretty awesome, man. It really is 100% rewarding. It definitely encourages us to do more shows when we know this is just not going out to the empty void. So. Yeah, but definitely if you guys come across Darth Herman 2 or John Holio in game, don't be afraid to send them invites and let them know they're doing great and they need to kick off that Jedi dude. Just have the show with the two of them and whatnot. So, or of course, mention them on the Discord. It's great. I had mentioned on stream that I was playing John Holio's deck, and we had a couple of people hit him up on Discord asking him questions about the deck and stuff. So,
yeah, and I was happy to field those. It was cool, like getting questions like immediately. People interested to try the deck out. It's pretty cool.
heck yeah,
How fast things go these days,
Power of the internet.
Yeah.
And before I forget, we'll mention again at the end of the show, but we are doing our second, I was gonna say annual, but we're every couple of months, probably every quarter.
Yeah,
we're doing the on Saturday, June 6th at 11 a.m. Central Time. We are doing another peasant charity event, which is a common and uncommon tournament, or only tournament, common and uncommon only tournament. I'll mention more at the end of the show so you guys can do the registering thing. But all right, it's pack one, pick one time. Alex, you excited?
Yeah.
Sweet. Ooh. All right, then we will start off. We'll go back to you this week, John. Oh, wait, no. Actually, no. I keep giving you the comments. So, Alex, you have the comments this week. All right. Reconnaissance, 2 shadow, slow spell. Give one of your units +2 attack and unblockable this turn. Decimate when it hits the enemy player this turn. Draw the top card of their deck. This card does some work, but it's especially potent with Corrupted Umbran being able to get in for 10 damage, lifesteal, as well as draw 2 cards because the Berserk card is pretty darn good. Oh, just a reminder for those of you that haven't caught up, they did do a draft update, so we're now drafting curated pack, Echoes curated pack. So that's why all these cards are going to be quote unquote reprints or cards from previous sets. Next up, we have Finest Hour, 1 Justice, fast spell, give a unit +3/+3 this turn. Enraged Aroctodon, 6/6 dinosaur for 7 primal. Berserk. Oh, I still haven't drafted this card, John. Have you? Hisul.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm just gonna start forcing it. I don't see it in pack 1. I only see it in pack 4, and by that time I'm like nowhere near it. And I did.
There's one in this pack.
I did take a display of honor. Of honor, pick 2 in a draft, and then it just wasn't open at all. I was like, sad face. Hisul Beastmaster, 5/5 shaman for 5 honor, which is fire, justice, primal, has overwhelm, and then renown. Play a 2/2 flying squirrel. Spell Strike Sorceress, 1/1 mage for 3 justice. When you play a spell Strike Sorceress gets a +1/+1 permanently. Shift 2. Linrai Evangel, 2/2 Yeti Cleric for 2 primal, overwhelm. Fate, gain a primal influence. Boot Knife will move on. Immortalize, 2 shadow for fast spell. Draw a unit from your void. Decimate, it gets exalted.
So these are some pretty solid commons. And as much I mean I love Coastal Beastmaster just as much as you guys do. But for me, it could be wrong here, but with how prevalent just winning combat is and how important that is, I would go with the Finest Hour.
Yeah, I can get behind that. It's practically a removal spell, right? I mean, other in everything but like actual functionality, it plays out like a removal spell a lot of the times. It's good on offense, good on defense. It could prevent a removal spell if they're doing fire, damage based removal. So yeah, I can get behind that. I think it's right up there with Immortalize. Both those are very safe picks that 95% of the time are going to make your deck. So I'm okay with that. John, do you have anything to
add? Yeah, I think in this comments I'm looking more at Immortalize just as the safer pack one pick one. But if I'm really feeling saucy, like Beastmaster, You know, like I might just force Beastmaster because love that guy. But like I'm really not even looking at Finest Hour because like if I'm gonna pick Finest Hour, I might as well just force Beastmaster at that point, right?
I mean, hands down, the strongest card is Beastmaster, no doubt about it. For the sake of
that logic.
For
right
for the sake of our new players, the argument here is that we're having is like straight up power level of School Beastmaster versus the splash ability and playability of Immortalize and Finest Hour being only a single influence. So that's why there's a discussion there. For the more veteran players, they already understand what we're talking about. And yeah, I mean, I've been known to first pick a display as well, and I think there's definitely an argument. Once again, which is honestly probably what I'm going to do. I think if I see a Beastmaster in either of my first 3 picks, I'm just going to slam it and hope I get there. Because, oh man, like if you guys have not played with Beastmaster, this card just does everything you want to do in Limited. Like a 5/5 for 5 is already a solid body. It's a little underpowered in this format just because of the Power Breach Sentinel and Corpse Bloom now running around that come down practically the very next turn. But the fact that it has Overwhelm means that it can't be chump blocked, which is huge, right? Because you can chump block a Corpse Bloom all day. And then the other thing
especially when it's, you know, it's a guy that you're wanting to spend a trick on just to get the squirrel anyway. So like when all that extra damage gets through, it's just extra rewarding.
Yeah, it's just such an efficient unit because it having a renown that's a very viable renown makes it to where, I mean, it's happened before where I've sat there like, okay, do I want to force the trick because that's why they're attacking the way they are, but do I want to try to take out the Beastmaster, or do I just want to target something else so they don't get the renown trigger? Like it's so, gosh, it really is just a great
makes
card.
Combat interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a phenomenal card. Okay,
but we digress.
yeah. I think it's okay. I actually think people, believe it or not, I actually think people like our in-depth pack one pick ones. I know sometimes we're a little straightforward about it, but I think they actually don't mind when we go kind of deeper into it because, once again, going back to what we talked about earlier, with a lot of people feeling like drafting is very intimidating.
Mm-hmm. You know, this is an intimidating pack, though.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Like I saw this, I screenshotted it right away. Okay, so going into our uncommons, we have Seed of Fury, which depleted unless you have a sigil in your hand, and you gain Skycrag influence. Funeral Pyre, actually, yeah, I'll talk about it in a minute. Funeral Pyre is 3 fire for a fast spell, deal 2 damage to an enemy, decimate, deal 2 damage to an additional enemy, and then, of course, limited all-star Twin Brood Sauropod. It is a 5/4 dinosaur for 5 time, and it has Echo, so you get 2 of them. What do you think, John?
Yeah, these are good uncommons too. And in fact, I'm eyeballing this Twin Brood Sauropod over that Immortalize.
Yep.
I just do want to give a shout out to Funeral Pyre and fellow podcaster Hats on Lamps. Dude, I saw him do some broken things with like two Acidonis and Funeral Pyre the other day. Like he did like the double spell damage mastery buff on it and then made copies of the spell, so it was like deal 8 to 2 enemies. Like,
oh my god,
yeah, he popped off. It was crazy. Anyway, I still don't think that's pickable over Sauropod here, but that was crazy.
Yeah, no, Sauropod, I agree. I actually like Funeral Pyre. I'm a little higher on Funeral Pyre and what is the Gambit card now? I always call it Gambit.
Desperate Gambit.
I think going back to Mighty Strikes, right, in a previous format, which was with Kasul Beastmaster, I think people undervalue the benefit of having a card essentially act as 2 cards, right? It's very easy for a player to play around a combat trick or a removal spell. It's a lot more difficult for them to play around 2, right? There have been plenty of times both. It's something that a little more seasoned drafters do, where they're like, okay, they have a trick, I can't play around it, so I'm just gonna block in a way where something's gonna die, right? And so you make these blocks, you make like a big block here and a double block here, so they're like, okay, something's gonna die, and then they do something like Funeral Pyre to take out 2 things, or they finish off your big unit and kill the other one, so both their things survive. You know what I mean? Like, or it just. And I think people undervalue that, and it could definitely, sometimes it doesn't do anything, don't get me wrong. There's sometimes where they only have one good target, and that's is what it is. But there are other times where it's going to get in more damage than they thought, or it's going to keep 2 of your units alive. And I think secretly, deceptively, those cards are a little bit better than people give them credit for. That being said, though, Twin Brood Sauropod, a 5/4 for 5 is completely serviceable, and getting 2 of them off of 1 card is some really good card advantage. So, John, though, going back to you, do you think that beats out Beastmaster hands down?
Yes, I do, because of the, I really like playing these recursion decks, and Sauropod is one of the better recursion targets also, especially if you can give it some persistent buffs that stay with it when it's in the void, and then you can bring it back and things like that. Yeah, I think it's just overall a little bit stronger than Beastmaster. They're pretty close though.
Yep. Just to expand a little bit on what Joe was saying, for example, if one of your Sauropods dies and then you bring it back with a triumphant return, it will actually echo on that, so you would actually get 2 7/6s for that one triumphant return. So that's where it starts getting really, really crazy. Okay, sending it back to you, Alex. We have a rare that I think is definitely worth talking about, and this is the Dawkins Staff. This is a +3/+3 weapon for 3 Combre, but there's more in power. So whenever you play a power, if you have 8 or more maximum power, draw the Dawkins Staff from your void. What do you think?
This is really hard. I think it's better. Getting it again after you have 8 power when you empower, I mean, I think that would have been more valuable last format. Like, the games tended to go longer. In this format, it's more aggro, at least that I'm seeing anyways. So I think I'm still on the Twin Brood Sauropod, although it's really close. Really close.
John?
Yeah, I agree. Like, it's also really close for me. There's not a lot of good weapons in the format, and this is like a great weapon. Like, the stats are great for the cost, and then just the fact that you don't you don't pay the normal weapon cost, which is going down a card when eventually you'll get the card back if the game goes on. Like, that kind of mitigates that issue. So I mean, yeah, the staff is like a very good card, and I agree. Like, it's really close. But I like starting off in just time here, as well as I'm really interested in just hedging void recursion stuff, and this Sauropod is a great place to start with. Like, I just really like, I think that deck is very powerful in the format right now, and like, it's resilient to like kind of the aggro strategies that Alex just mentioned. So yeah, I think I'm also still on the Sauropod, but yeah, it is really close.
I like that you mentioned hedging, because that's actually a topic I want to throw at you guys later for another show to go in depth on that. But anywho, I digress. Playing devil's advocate, one thing to throw at you guys. The Dawkins Staff is Combre, which means you have access to things like I always forget the name of it because I hate playing that card, but the 3-cost 1/1 flying Warcry. You have access to Archive Curator, you have access to Humbug Nests, you have access to the Endurance Wisp, the 1/3 Endurance Flyer, as well as the, oh my god, I'm drawing a blank on these names. The 1/3 Flyer that has invulnerable to damage on your turn. Do you think all those small flyers that come out pretty early that would carry staff extremely well, does that tip your hat at all?
No, I mean, I already know that those are in the format, and like they're great with staff. Like, those are like the perfect cards to go with it, and like that's why it's like a very good card here. It's just in the format in general, and like in Combre and all those things. I just think I just still prefer the Sauropod as the first pick is all. Like, and in creation in general, like just with Soul Drain Smithing, things like that, even just getting it, even having this as a target to get back might be worth it sometimes, and like, yeah, like those cards you mentioned are really good for this weapon. Yeah, I still prefer the Sauropod.
All right, sweet. Well, that's a pack one, pick one. So we're taking Twin Brood Sauropod, and yeah, the card is just always great for all the reasons John said.
Yeah, you also forgot to mention another one I thought of, and I just drew a blank there too. It was like Power Breach, like Beach Boy is another, like that kind of gets it back sooner too,
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah.
So like yeah, you curve it out. You have the staff, you have one of those flyers, you slap it on, and then if you get Beach Boy out around 5 or 6, or if you manage to ramp into him or something, then this just gets that staff out like even faster. It just kind of powers it back into your. So it's like a turbo like. I mean, if you've ever played against a Combre deck on ladder or something, right? Like it's kind of like aggro but ramp. It can feel pretty smothering when you're going against this kind of strategy. So yeah, it's a good strategy, but yeah, no, still just Sauropod.
All right, with that, let's go into our main topic, who's the Beatdown. So this is, I don't know, what would you guys call it? Like a skill set, a strategy point, a mindset, like any.
Yeah, it's like I think mindset is a good thing. Like
Something like
it's
in
just
your
something to
toolbox.
think about in every draft game. Like this is just something that happens. You have an idea of this before you even are matched with your opponent, and then you have an idea, at the start of the game based on your hand, and then you have another idea about your status, after a couple turns, and like as the game goes on, so it's like an evolving thing. It's something to think about every game.
Yep.
Talk about it in depth here.
Just because you mentioned draft, this actually does cross over to constructed as well. This is definitely one of our kind of level up shows where this is a skill that you could definitely use across the board to
It does, but I do think it's like especially helpful in draft.
Oh yeah, for sure. 100%. And so let's elaborate. So who's the Beatdown, or who's the control player, who's defense, is essentially identifying, and I would say every turn, but I've definitely made this decision mid combat. That was definitely one of my highlights. It was literally like, and to go back to that, just to elaborate real quick, or to finish that thought, is who is the offensive player and who is the player that is on defense. And it's not as simple as identifying like, oh, I'm the red player, so I should be swinging in every time. There's multiple things that go into this, and we'll go into depth on this show, but it's definitely one of those things that you have to think about in a very dynamic and fluid game to increase your win percentage here, because a miscalculation of who the Beatdown is or who should be attacking can easily cost you a game or cost your opponent a game. And going back to that slight comment I made, there was literally a game where I was behind the entire time. Don't get me wrong, my opponent and I were kind of head to head, but they had the lead. They were essentially the Beatdown the whole game. And I guess they kind of failed to make that reassessment. And at one point when they were swinging in a similar attack that they've been doing, for the last 4 or 5 turns, I sat there, I started to do the math, and I realized that as we were both developing our board and they A-spaced, that I could block a certain way to leave me enough units to kill them on the crackback. And this literally happened mid-combat. I was working on my blocks, trying to make sure I didn't die and find out the most profitable bots. And then I was like, wait a minute, they're at 8, hold on. And then all of a sudden I was like, wait, if they don't play anything, I can kill them. And sure enough, I readjusted my blocks and we managed to win that game because of the fact that our opponent misidentified or incorrectly identified who the Beatdown was, and we mid-combat changed the dynamic of that. Anything to add real quick on the overview, Alex, before we jump right into it?
No, sounds good. Let's do it.
Yep, I will say this, that John is really, really good about this. John is one of the reasons that it's funny because I typically in Constructed tend to play aggro, but in Limited, I don't know, I guess my playstyle is more mid-rangey, but is one of those things where you always check if you can kill your opponent this turn, because sometimes you can, so you definitely don't want to miss that.
I mean, thank you for the compliment, but it's also just, I find it easier to do that while I'm spectating somebody too.
Fair.
It's like some things about the game are easier when you're like the one pushing the buttons, but it's like also some of those other things are easier to see when you're spectating. So, yeah. But thank you though. But yeah.
Yep. So speaking of that, definitely go back a couple episodes to how to improve your game, because that's one of the things we talk about. Have friends spectate you.
Mm-hmm.
I was just gonna add that this is something that, like, the more you play, like you said, just strategic card games, Magic, whatever, Hearthstone, games like that, like this comes more intuitively. So like if you have like more years behind you and playing, like it's natural for this to just be something that you don't really think about sometimes. It's just like, oh yeah, obviously I'm just attacking because I'm the beatdown. It's not something that you always think about, but in this show we're like trying to get you to think about it, I guess. So
it's you see it a lot. If for those of you that watch competitive and organized play, you see it a lot. I think one thing that I do want to throw in here, which is something I've noticed when you first start doing this, I have two thoughts going on. I'm not 100%. I'm just going to throw them out there and you guys can clean up my words for me. So a lot of times when you start thinking about this, people kind of find that, for example, going once again back to that earlier one, is if you're on defense, you tend to like, okay, I've stabilized. And everyone's felt that way at some point or another, especially in limited, where you're like, okay, my opponent's smashing me, but okay, cool. I got to my 5 drops. The board is stable. And you kind of fall into this comfortable zone of like, okay, I'm good. Let me make sure I'm not dead for like a turn or two. And then you start attacking if you feel like you have the upper hand. And that's not wrong. It's just it's kind of like the 70% play versus the 85% play to win. And you see this a lot in more seasoned players where they can identify right away when the roles switch and and you'll see it where someone is completely on the back foot. And then the very next turn they play one card or their opponent doesn't do something. And then all of a sudden they're attacking. Or the flip side to that where someone's being super aggressive, they're expending their cards to get a ton of damage, and then all of a sudden it's just full stop. They're like, nope, I can't attack. It's too much of a cost now. And being able to identify those moments exactly when they happen will definitely up your win percentage, because those are those incremental advantages that you get to win those games.
I think those examples you mentioned are the ones that kind of scream at you like, hey, did you just notice this? Something crazy just happened, like you've been getting attacked this whole game and suddenly you're not, like those ones kind of jump out, right? And when, after hearing this, maybe you've never heard this before, maybe you recognize those situations as that happening, then you need to hone in on those more subtle ones that aren't just jumping out at you like that too, right? Like, because there are very subtle signs of this happening, that you may not overtly notice, but they're happening.
That's actually a really, really good point, John. Actually, yeah. So when you guys are playing against someone that you recognize to be a good player, right? The Watch Wolf, the Titus and Blossom, the Extinction, the Pachi. When you're playing against these players, you're like, oh man, why'd I queue into them? The Raven Dragon, right? When you queue into these people, and for example, like what John said, if you're attacking, right, you get out early, you go 2 drop, 3 drop, 4 drop, you're swinging, and then all of a sudden, randomly, this opponent that you respect their skill level is attacking you, you probably should reassess the board state, because there might be a good chance that the roles have changed, right? We're not living in an onslaught format anymore, so people aren't chump attacking. So that's something to consider. Like, if you already respect their skill set, understand that if they were defending this whole time and all of a sudden they're attacking, there's probably a reason for it.
I mean, even if you don't know the player, like, unless they've just been making glaring mistakes throughout the game, I would by default like give someone a benefit of the doubt as far as making basically when I see an attack kind of like you just described, I'm like, that's a weird attack. And then I'm like, at that point, I just, I have to like you mentioned, completely reevaluate what the state of the game. Like, that weird attack indicates that they suddenly think that they're the beatdown or whatever, and maybe they're draw, maybe they know of a card that they can draw. Like there's some reason they're doing that, unless like they've given me some reason to think that they're just throwing the game away, like they're tilted or whatever, which does happen, and I have noticed that and thought that and been proven to be correct. But no, like, I mean, there's plenty of great players that I don't know from seeing them around, like people that played the game a year ago, 2 years ago, that just came back, or just some, you just mentioned Watch Wolf, like some Magic Pro that's just getting into the game or whatever, right? So yeah, like that is a one thing to consider though, Jedi. Like you're absolutely right. Like regarding weird attacks.
Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and dive right into it. So these are going to be the things that you can use, like the little key points and data points you can collect to identify or have a better understanding of who's the beatdown, who's the control. So first off is the plan or the purpose of your deck, right? This is what your deck is trying to do. If you guys have watched us on the streams and the various draft walkthroughs we have on YouTube and stuff, you'll see that it's one of those things like, okay, we're the aggressive deck. We're running 10 2-drops with a bunch of combat tricks. Or, okay, like our early game is kind of meh. We're just kind of hoping to survive until we get to our bomb rares or our heavy hitters at 6 and 7. And identifying that is a good leg up of before you even play your opening hand to have an idea like, yeah, there's probably a pretty good chance that you're going to be the control player for the first part of the game. So yeah, the purpose of what your deck's trying to do, which is consideration of like the curve, the level of removal you have, right? Is all your removal eviscerates that aren't going to come down till later in the game, or is all your removal sears and defiles that remove the early game? Sometimes what factions you're playing kind of plays into that as well, right? If you're the Elysian Flyer deck, you're hoping to get out early and aggressive to race your opponent, since your units aren't going to really match up against them. I already mentioned top ends, and then the occasional build around, right? If you're kind of like, hey, I'm going to be the mysterious Waystone deck, so my whole point is to get my Waystone out and then start sacking things, that can adjust your game plan as well. John?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, so you're just basically talking about, the first phase of thinking about, who's the aggressor and who's the defender for like the start of the game. Like you're thinking like this is not even the start of the game. This is more of like the deck building phase, right? Like
yes,
more than anything. So
even the draft, I would say.
True. Yeah. Even earlier, like as you're building your deck in the draft portion, even true. That's when you start thinking about this. Like, do I have a deck already chock full of 2s and 3s and like defiles and like things that are So at that point, you're if you finish that draft and you don't get any big top end and things like that, then you're for those last few picks, maybe you're prioritizing a few extra combat tricks or weapons if you're offered them to promote that aggressive strategy that you were kind of offered through the draft. And so like you're going into that deck construction trying to construct a deck that's going to always be the beatdown, for example. And then you could have the extreme opposite of that, where you're going into every game like with dorky early game units, like wall style things, 1/4s, 1/5s, 2/5s, like up the curve, and then all your stuff, you just have a couple big evasive bombs or something. And so you're going to prioritize like, those dorky early units and control cards that just help you, and like ways to dig for those bombs, because like you have a specific win con in a deck like that, and it's not spamming good statted early units. It's like digging and finding that one win condition or creature or whatever. So starting in the drafting and deck building phase, we're already considering if we're going to be the aggro or the control player. So
yep. And of course, most plans don't survive engaging the enemy, but it's good to have. It's a shortcut, right? The more information you have and the less things you have to think about right away or ahead of time saves you energy during the game. So that was the deck building and planning phase of it, where you kind of start to identify these things. Next up, we have our opening hand, right? We still haven't played a card, but this allows you to decide whether you're going to redraw or keep that, which shout out is another episode we did in depth, so check that out. As well as the misplay. The misplay just did an episode on that, and I am doing an write-up article on that as well. So anyway, moving on from the shameless plugs. So Alex, our opening hand is another way where we start to identify what if we're going to come out the gates being the control player or the more aggressive player. What are some of the things that kind of help factor this in? I know there is going to be overlap throughout this, but it's still worth talking about each one individually.
So your opening hand can already like give you information that might be contradictory, like what your deck is normally trying to do. Like, say you built a control deck, but all control decks have 2 drops, 3 drops, and 4 drops. So say you're what a deck that you would think is a control deck, but you drew your bomb 2, 3, and 4 drops. So like you're gonna curve out, and then you're gonna be aggressive. Like you're not gonna not attack because, oh, I'm the control player. Like I'm gonna hold back and prevent against charge units or whatever. It's like, so that's like your opening hand tells you if your game is gonna play out a little differently like that. But yeah, like what is in your opening hand? Do you have the tools that allow you to play your deck out in the way that you think it's going to happen? If you're going first, like if you're on the play or on the draw, determining if you should redraw or not, going into the game already and you think you're an aggressive deck and you drew, you have like 4 power and 1 unit, and like as John would say, that's a whack hand. You need to redraw that because you want to draw your gas. Basically, if you're aggressive, you want to have this stuff in your opening hand. Usually less power. Control decks tend to need power more, so you might not need as much power in your opening hand to go ahead and implement your aggressive game plan. And then if you're a control deck and you just got all your removal in your opening hand, you're like, sure, let's go for it. So yeah, the opening hand determines a lot, whether you're the beatdown or aggressor. Not that can't, beatdown or defensive. Not that it can't change mid game, but yeah, it's pretty much a big point of reference for the game.
Yeah, the way.
Yeah, and sorry, go ahead, Jedi.
It's kind of a combination of things too. Just to go a little more in depth, is like the play draw versus as well as the removal in your hand. Similar to building on what Alex was saying. For example, if you're on the draw and then you have your 2 drop and then some removal, your game plan there initially is obviously you're gonna get that 2 drop down there, but you're gonna realize you don't have maybe a 3 and a 4. You're already planning on using that removal in those positions, so then that's gonna adjust you where like, yeah, there's probably a good chance that you're not gonna quite come out the gate swinging because of the fact that you're only gonna be getting in 2 damage a turn, and you want to try to maximize, maybe try to get a 2-for-1 out of that removal and stuff like that. So there's a way there where even if you are potentially the more aggressive deck, where you're gonna take a control standpoint for the first couple of turns of the game.
Yeah, that's a good point. You can also there's like, as kind of an extreme example, like we kind of mentioned a minute ago, you're not a normal mid-range kind of draft deck where easily kind of lean either way. You're like an extremely aggro where you like don't even have a 4 cost or greater unit in your deck. Like you had a good deck like this the other day on stream, Jedi, where I think your highest cost, you curved out at 3, and then you had some like 4 cost combat tricks for like your top end, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so with a deck like that opening hand is going to be very important, right? Yeah. Like it's so much more important that you're able to, because your game plan there is so specific, and you have, if it gets interrupted, you basically have no way in the deck to kind of make up for that or attack from a different angle or anything like that. You're kind of like all in on that aggro strategy with a deck that's that aggressive. So in that opening hand, your game plan is be aggressive, and you look at your hand and it's like, 2 1-drops and 5 sigils. It's like, that's not quite gonna get you there, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're gonna redraw that immediately. Like you're looking for a deck like that, you're looking to curve out, and you're looking to have like at least 1 trick so that you can keep that pressure going as you curve out. And so that's what we're talking about here with your opening hand. Like, as far as, mulligans are extremely important, especially if your deck is very much one way or the other. And like you mentioned, like, mulligans are a tricky topic and worth an entire episode worth of discussion, which yeah, you already mentioned. Go check that out to elaborate on this particular part of your game.
Yeah, I believe the episode is called Better Than 6. Is it better than 6? So definitely check it out. I'll find the number to it while one of you guys are talking, but yeah, so I think we wrapped up that portion of it up pretty well. Yeah, your opening hand is definitely a deciding factor for sure, and important. It's definitely not something you can skip out on. Okay, so next up is during the game. In the game, one of the first things you can look at is your life total or life totals, period. This is a good thing to decide on whether a lot of this comes into play in a racing scenario where this is kind of the most razor edge or blade running type of scenario as far as who's the beatdown, who's the control player, because let's just face it, there can only be one in each game at any given time. So if both you and an opponent are just kind of passing across each other on the battlefield like two ships in the night, attacking on both turns, there's a 100% chance that one of you is wrong. And so
Yes.
yeah, you always have to look at that and figure it out. Like, wait a minute, I'm attacking them. I think I have them dead before I'm dead. Why are they attacking me? Don't get me wrong. There is a chance that they can miss. Once again, there's a chance that you're correct and they're wrong, but there's also the flip side where you're wrong because they have maybe a victor's cry and double damage in their hand or something. So just something to consider. But so anyways, to go in depth, a couple of things to consider to help you make this decision are are they almost dead, right? Is their life total low enough where you think you have enough pressure to kill them on board? Are you almost dead? You think you're the aggressor, you're getting in a bunch of damage, and then all of a sudden they sneak in a really big swing or combat trick or a berserk unit, which can happen in this format, and all of a sudden you went from 18 to 7. What are your outs, right? There's a good scenario of that is, for example, if you have maybe 2 flyers and a couple of small ground units, and all of a sudden they get an early giant on the board where your ground units aren't going to be attacking anymore and they're getting in a bunch of damage. I totally won a game last week or earlier, another draft where my opponent got a turn 5 giant, I believe, and some other big ground unit, and I ended up winning that game because I just stopped blocking and swung in the air with everything I could and did everything I could to get as much damage in the air, and then just started playing jump blockers. And it ended up paying off. It was close. I mean, I think I was at like 5 by the end of it or something. But you have to play to your outs. There's sometimes where your only out is to draw that card and hope, you have to draw that removal spell, right? If they have a big unit you can't get through, there's no point in you attacking and not having a blocker back to, if your only out is to get that unit off the board. The flip side to that, if your out is to get them low enough to where that one seer in your deck is turned on and can be lethal, then now you kind of want to start looking more aggressive plays. And which the last point I had on here is direct damage, which is exactly what I just talked about. Do you have some way of getting in, reaching and smashing their face with additional damage? So is that what you got to do? So yeah, sending it back to Mr. Aggressor himself. John, please elaborate.
Yeah, there's a lot of tricks and berserk in the format, which we keep kind of mentioning. And so that's another kind of thing to think about, is like when to snap off that berserk, right? Like, are you expecting your opponent to play a unit that's going to strictly outclass your berserker on the following turn? That makes it a lot riskier to berserk on the turn where you get that open attack. But sometimes it's going to be worth it on an open board where your opponent has no power available, for example, to get in that one big berserk attack with your combat trick. Sometimes it's worth it to just get that one attack in while you can, knowing that your opponent's playing these certain colors or this certain deck strategy, and you're going to get jammed up on the ground, and your guy, even berserk attack or not, he's just going to be stuck there, not attacking. You know what I mean? And like, now getting this big attack in is going to net you like 8 or 10 or whatever additional points of damage throughout the game, even though you're basically signing up your unit to die next turn, expecting it to run to a wall. So that's like one kind of higher level thing in this format in particular to consider. A lot of times it's not correct to berserk, but I mean, it's so game dependent and so deck dependent. Like, and this also kind of goes with what Jedi mentioned, knowing your outs. Like, knowing your deck is really important with properly evaluating whether you're supposed to be attacking or defending at any given time. And sometimes you don't have an out, right? To what your opponent has done or is doing, or maybe they just drew something from their void, and it's in their hand, for example, and so you're just like, well, I have nothing for this. But let's say it's a complicated board state that maybe I'm even having trouble evaluating. It's like, well, at that point, your out is your opponent making a mistake, and so you want to make some plays to try and force that scenario. Like, if this is specifically, I'm talking about your deck cannot draw a card, or even winvoke a card that'll get you out of this situation where you're just basically dead on board or whatever. And so you can still kind of like, you can make up an out. You can by attacking in a strange way, your opponent is given an opportunity to make a game-ending mistake for them, and suddenly you can be back in it. So those are other things to think about. Anything to add for you, Alex?
I guess it was just like a little bit of elaboration on what Jedi was saying. Like, sometimes you need to sacrifice some units and do one of these attacks that your opponent might be like, what are they doing? Or like, ace spacing the turn before, you don't even have the card that you need to win next turn because you have like, I need to draw my Fire Conjuring next turn, but I have to ace space this turn in order for the Fire Conjuring to be.
That is such a good example.
Something like that. So it's just like you said, knowing your deck and knowing the outs that you have, and like, if you don't have an out, hey, your opponent's computer might crash. You never know.
But no, like, you gave such a good example, like, right? You're like, really, well, good. I have this one way to win in my deck, but I have to attack in this otherwise suicidal manner this turn to enable that situation to possibly happen, and that's the only way I win this game. And guess what? I'm sure we've all literally won games like that, right? Like, you feel so rewarded when you figured that out. Oh my gosh, that's so cool. What a good example. Yeah. And like, the only way to put yourself in that situation is to really think about the situation and know that just mindlessly drawing cards off the top of your deck and playing them is never going to win you this game. You have to make a move of some sort, right?
Yep. And of course, there's always the chance that we can predict what our opponent's going to do the best to our ability, but there's always a chance that they're not working with the same information you are, and they don't think the same way you do. So sometimes you just attack to let your opponent make the mistake, right? It's definitely happened sometimes, where, going back to what John was saying, where you have no outs. You're like, your deck, you're looking at it, and you're like, yeah, I have no outs to this situation. So you can attack, and then sometimes all of a sudden your opponent can make a play that you didn't. You know what the optimal play is for your opponent, right? Oh yeah, they block here, they have a trick for this, and there you go. So you swing because you've identified that you have no other outs, and all of a sudden your opponent blocks in a different way, and something happens that you weren't expecting. You're like, wait a minute, hold on, I'm back in this.
What I thought they had, yeah.
So yeah, just to throw that out there. Going back to what we were talking about. Episode 47 of Eternal Journey is Better Than 6. That's where we go in-depth discussion on whether to keep a hand or redraw it. And of course, the more recent misplay, episode 42, is where they talk about hands as well. But okay, that's it for the life total part of it. The last thing we're going to talk about, which is probably the most intricate one, where you get the most decisions on who is the beatdown, who is not, is board states, right? Things are like, are you gaining the advantage in this game from defending or from attacking? Are you losing advantage, right? Are you swinging, you're getting in more damage, and then all of a sudden your opponent plays a 5-6, and now all of a sudden attacking isn't very viable because you're going to lose your best unit, regardless of a combat trick or not. And once again, going back to that racing scenario, do combat tricks change the math, right? Have you all of a sudden identified that your opponent keeps leaving up a certain kind of influence with X amount of power up every single turn that just doesn't seem viable? Or the other side, right? All of a sudden you're in a racing scenario, your opponent's swinging, but you realize that you just drew that victor's cry, which is extra damage that your opponent was not anticipating all of a sudden, and that changes the math. And then lastly, that we've been talking about is the race scenario, right? sometimes during a board stall, your opponent finds a way to start whittling down your life total, and you need to pull the trigger on becoming aggressive to be your only out. Much like what we were talking about a little bit earlier, where you're sitting there, you're chump blocking their giant, and you just realize if I just sit here and keep losing a card for free to my opponent, like there's no way I'm gonna get this. I need to start doing something. And once again, you could also throw your opponent for a loop, right? Sometimes if your opponent is a little more astute, this is something where I think this is kind of like better players leveling up leveling up each other, or next leveling each other. There you go. That's the word I was looking for, or phrase.
Got there.
Where it took me a second, but where you're defensive and then all of a sudden you attack, your opponent's going to think about that, right? Much like what John said, be like, wait, why are they attacking here? That's kind of weird. And you could essentially change the dynamic of the game through mind games, Jedi mind trick them all of a sudden. I don't exactly recommend this all the time. There's very finite times where that would make a difference. For those of you that played in the Onslaught, what was it, 2 sets ago, 1 set ago, where we had Onslaught? It was 1 set ago,
I think it's
right?
2
sets. I don't know, with all the campaigns and stuff, like things. Anywho,
yeah.
Onslaught would definitely created a very dynamic kind of board state, because now all of a sudden you would see these attacks where you're like, okay, that's weird, and then you had to make the decision, like, do I take the damage or do I block it because they're just, are they playing because they have a trick, or are they playing this attack because they have an onslaught unit they want to trigger? And so it was a very interesting dynamics, but not having that here in this format means that normally something's up, right? And
I was thinking, like,
we have the occasional tribute, which is the closest thing we have, I think,
true,
in this set. And there's I think there is there's a few onslaughts in this set, but they're not really a mechanic.
Like, if there was a set that had a lot of onslaught and tribute, then that would really make you think about stuff.
Yeah. And so that's one of those things as well. And finally, milling, right? You guys have, I don't know how often it's happened to you, but I normally for a while there was running, especially with like the occasional eviscerate and sadistically and stuff like that. I have the, what is it? It's an Umbran. It's escaping me right now.
Banished Umbran?
Banished. There you go. Thank you.
The mill on a stick guy?
Yeah. It's the 2/3 for 3 in a shadow, and you could pay 5 to mill 2 cards from a player. And sometimes you realize, going back to that scenario, like, okay, we're at a stalemate. My opponent has an amazing board state. I can't attack profitably into it. I have a pretty decent board state. They can't really attack profitably into me. So my only out is to mill. So all of a sudden, you're not the aggressor, you're the control player. You want to try not to die and mill your opponent out. So that's another option as well that can dictate board state. So starting off with you, Alex, what kind of board states and things, tips and tricks you have for identifying who's the beatdown, who's the control here?
Well, I guess what's funny is, one thing is, I was thinking about this last thing that you said was not milling, but there's been games that I've won that I'm just like, okay, if nothing changes in this game, I'm going to win because they're going to draw out of cards. Like, I'm so set up defensively that, all right, I'm just going to not make the mistake here to give my opponent the window to beat me, So
yeah, it's a situation where your mid-range deck is suddenly literally just a mill deck with no mill cards.
Exactly. You're just like, I'm just here to outlive my opponent long enough just so they run out of cards, even though you don't have any mill cards. So that's like the not, like you said, no mill card mill deck. But
guess we a mill deck now, boys.
Like the race scenario thing, it's like sometimes your opponent's gonna, in a board stall, your opponent's gonna find a way. They're like, okay, here, they got the flyer out. So now you might have had an option in your hand that you were just like holding on because your opponent can like blow you out with a combat trick or some other way to like put a monkey wrench in your plans. And then sometimes you just got to go for it, so you're just going to go for it, even though mathematically or statistically your opponent is going to be able to stop you, but you don't want to not go for it because if you're going to die next turn anyway, so just do the play that's super risky, but if it works out, it might win you the game. I mean, yeah, as far as board states, it's kind of clear, I guess, if you're the beatdown or the defensive player. One thing about control decks is, and I heard this on limited resources, is like defensive speed, where it's like it's something that happens earlier in the game, like on turn 2 or 3, that's like a defensive play, but it's like building you your the building blocks that you need to get to the end of the game and play your big cards. So it's like you're still developing the board just with cards that don't really seem like they would be good cards, but they're getting you to your late game, I guess. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does in some ways. Something that comes to mind with that example is something like something like in Magic, like an artifact where it's like only one to play, and it doesn't really do anything now. But if I amass a couple of these later in the game, I can crack them to combine damage, or something's counting the number of artifacts while having this activated threat on board, that kind of thing. Like, yeah, I get it. It's like setting up for your strat.
That jumps out like for this is like the 1/3 primal unit that like gets bigger later in the game if the opponent has more stuff in their graveyard.
Yeah,
so it's like a unit that like
spotter,
right?
Like outlook spotter or something. Lookout spotter. Yeah.
It like holds the ground. It's gonna block early.
Good example.
Late game, it can become the thing you finish the game out with. So it's like defensive speed. I don't know where they came up with that, but
I like that.
Yeah. It's interesting because sometimes you have that information on board as well, right? It's kind of playing your outs or seeing how your opponent's strategy plays out as well. If you see a big one is like Gravewatch Ancestor, right? That's one of the reasons why I really like that card. Is probably, I don't know if that's gonna be my pet card or not. I guess we'll have to wait till the Sunset Show for me to think about. But anywho, seeing that on board, you kind of get you can identify like, okay, they're at 5 power, or maybe they have 6 already, right? To be able to activate it to get attack and health equal to the highest health in your void or their void. So it's one of those things where you're like, okay, I have the removal spell for their big corpse boom or whatever, but then they could just make their Gravewatch Ancestor bigger the next turn. Do I have an answer for that? Do I attack into it to try to get it forced to block before they get their big blocker or something bigger on the board where they have to trade off their ancestor? Kind of one of those things. Or you see them, I don't know, what's another one? They have an Echo card. They play a Twin Brood Sauropod. There's another one coming down. Things like that can help you kind of predict how many turns you have to be the control or how many turns you have to be the beatdown. It's kind of looking at bigger pictures. Another thing, not just the board state. John mentioned extremes. The first example I used is very much the extreme, right? Where everything is practically on the board, and that moment, that board state is what's going to identify who's the beatdown or not. But sometimes you can look at the bigger picture, going back to the plan of your deck, right? What John was saying, where I know the biggest unit I have in my deck is a 3-drop. So at every single turn that my opponent's not dead is win percentages I'm losing. Because I know that they're going to be able to play their 5 and 6 drops and even 7 drops, because we know they're in this format, and I'm not going to have an answer to it. And every combat trick I use on defense is that's another good example, once again, going back to that deck where, yes, sometimes I will have to use my combat tricks on defense as a removal spell, but maybe it's worth using my life as a resource and taking that hit of 5 or even 7 to be able to attack, and then use that combat trick in an aggressive manner that could potentially lead to more damage. The other side to that as well is, okay, I have a bunch of 2/1s. Is it worth using a combat trick to get their 1/3 off the board? So that could identify whether I'm the beatdown or I have to wait till I have something like maybe a gambit that I don't feel like can get in some additional damage and things like that. Like it's a never-ending what if thing, and that's why this kind of mentality or skill set is so crucial to have, because it's one of those things where it's going to be both, right, John? Like sometimes you're going to notice clear as day that hey, I properly assessed who was the beatdown in this moment, and that won me the game. And then other times it's going to be more subtle, where identifying that you should have been attacking 2 turns ago, or identifying that, hey, you need to stop attacking now, might win you the game 5 turns later. So it's a very intricate kind of mindset and decision making process, but it will improve your game immensely, allowing you, once again, so reverse like defensive speed that Alex was talking about as well. If you position yourself in a manner where you aren't forced to do something, then that gives you more options, which leads to a higher chance of you winning. For example, if you are sitting there and you are trading off with your opponent, you're going back to the scenario where both of you are attacking. One of you has to be wrong, right? And finally, let's say you were the one that was incorrect. You attacked a few too many times and let them get in too much damage, and all of a sudden you went from 12 to, let's say, 5. And now you have an eviscerate that you want to save for, I don't know, a flyer or something, but you're looking at the board state and now you see that they have 2 different units that are lethal, and you're forced, you have to use the eviscerate to stay alive. Versus if maybe you identified that you were the control player 2 turns sooner and you left more things back so they couldn't get in that extra 5 damage or whatnot, and now you could afford to take a hit later in the game that can offer you an attack. Did I explain that right? I feel like I might have gone a little too deep, but does that make sense?
I think you got there. Yeah, like those are the subtle ones, right? Like that's when you're like, man, how did I end up in this situation? And that's when you can, obviously post-mortem, or hopefully not, but post action, right? Like go back and think about, okay, what did I do, 1 turn ago, 2 turns ago? Like where did I mess up my evaluation? Because obviously I was wrong at some point, whether I was the beatdown or not. And like you might be able to identify then where, okay, opponent did this. That's when I should have noticed, or shifted my mindset right there. Like that was the clue that I missed. And so thinking about that, once you start noticing things going wrong, might be a clue like that you did something wrong. Maybe not this turn, but previously. And so that might help you identify, while get into the mindset, and just not the habit, but you'd have the experience to know when it's happening as opposed to after the fact. And this, this whole segment, board states, I mean, this is complicated. Every game is different, like every deck is different. And I mean, we spend a whole segment on the show talking about one of these for 10 or 20 minutes, and you only get I don't know how long the timer is in game, but 1.5, 2 minutes, whatever, to do these things each turn. So this is like a complicated thing that we're trying to get you to think about, and we want you to be doing automatically as much as possible after you get enough experience. But yeah, I mean, this is something that like we mentioned, needs constant reevaluation, evaluation throughout the game. One thing in particular, I guess I wanted to mention was early game kind of sequencing and board states. As far as like the obvious thing is like power and influence, right? So you can curve out properly, but like there's a lot of strangers and symmetrical stranger effects in this format, right? So sequencing your 1/3 versus 2/3 versus 2/1 strangers and their various abilities versus what your opponent is doing is like something that it's like a little dance that happens in the early game in a lot of games for me in this format. Are you guys feeling this as well? Right? Yeah, so like that's just kind of something that happens a lot in this format. So it's just kind of something I'm thinking about. Everyone kind of has these same strangers making up, if you're similar colors, you have these kind of same early game units that are making up your decks. And not every, maybe you each have like the Steely, the Magnificent, and the Covetous Stranger in your hands, right? And like it's just funny how like what people will order which of those plays on turns 2, 3, and 4 just on their own and based on what the opponent's doing. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of just ways that you can sequence those early plays to help push this control versus aggro, mindset based on those strangers' abilities, like battle skill, like, do I need to aggressively try and roll these battle skills? Do I need to, like, my unit's already outclassed. Do I need to just trade this guy in right now for a treasure, aka like a card draw, to replace this already dead unit that I know is dead? All these like little things in the early game, like those decisions can end up mattering so much. Like at the end of the game, it's kind of crazy when you really break those things down.
Yeah, very solid point. We've had plenty of what's the plays that were elaborate that was as early as turn 2. So I do agree. I think good point, John. Good point. That's why you're the best player in the podcast.
Yeah, whatever.
All right. I think that's gonna do it for this one. Right, Alex? Any closing statements or anything?
No, I mean, I was just gonna say with board states, it's like and going even to an earlier point of knowing your deck, it's like if you have lifesteal in your deck, it's something to consider. You can race easier, especially if like you have a spiteful strike in your hand that could just be backbreaking, something like that. But yeah, just always be mindful of what's in your deck and what your outs are, which we've said, but just want to reinforce it.
Yeah,
sure. Knowing your deck is so crucial to getting this right.
100%. 100%.
And some people just like, some people will just do their draft and just mindlessly queue into their games and like not even know what their draw. You know what I mean? Like, if you don't go in depth on a lot of stuff, like at least take that advice to heart, right? Like you should, while you're playing a draft game, you should literally know what you have in your deck to that you can draw to help in any given situation. That is something you should be thinking about on the opponent's turn prior. Every single game. Like, okay, if I and you can think about that in specific and broad terms. Like, what if I draw a power? What if I draw a trick? What if I draw a unit? You can already be thinking about those things on the opponent's turn. And like, if you already have some idea about those things, that like gives you more time on your turn to do these evaluations like on a higher level and just make sure you're absolutely correct about what you should be doing in any given turn. So
that's a good advice. Try to analyze the board state during your opponent's timer a lot. Try to know your play before you are going to do it.
Speaking of knowing your play, it's time for dun. What's the play?
What's the play?
Nice.
Well done, Alex. Nice. I appreciate that, buddy. Okay. What's the play this week? Our opponent is on Destruction. They have 2 of 5 power up. We are Rakano, and we are... Oh, actually, this is the deck you were talking about, that we both talked about, the aggressive Rakano deck.
Great deck.
We're at 5 of 5 in Rakano. Our opponent's at 14 life. We're at 23 life. Our opponent has a Waystone Gate up, and I want to say they have 0 activations on it, considering what their board state looks like. Yeah, that looks right.
Like they just played they probably played Rectifier this turn.
Yep. Yeah, because they went Waystone on 3, Guardian on 4, and then Rectifier on 5. Yeah. So 0 activations on Waystone Gate. They have 3 cards in hand. We have 2 cards in hand with the form of Siege Provisions, the 2-cost relic. Spellcraft 1, give a unit Endure, I think is the... Anyways, it gives a unit invulnerable to damage this turn, and then you can pay 3 to activate it to give a unit +2/+2 and endurance this turn. And then our Handcuffing Storytellers, the 2/3 for 3 with Warcry, and Mastery 6, put a Sword of the Sky King into your deck. Board states. Our opponent has the 3/3 endurance Guardian, which was Xenon Guardian? Is it Xenon Guardian?
I think so.
Okay. The 1/1 Rectifier, and then we have a 1/3 Steely Stranger, a silenced 6/8 Berserker. I forgot the name. It doesn't matter.
Relentless Combatant.
Thank you. Good job, John. And then the 3/1 or 3/2 Mark Maker. All right, Alex, going to you, buddy. What's your... Oh no, actually, I think we went to you first last week, didn't we? All right, we'll go back to you, John. What's your play here?
All right.
And why?
Sure. So I have one question. Did you pull the siege provisions out of your market?
Yes.
Interesting. I don't know why I just I just saw that salvo sitting there and I was just like, wow, were you market provisioning this
Yeah.
series?
Yep.
That almost seems crazy to me because it's such a good card. It's so main deckable.
Well, I mean,
I guess you just didn't have much going on in your market, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I think we had like a 2-drop, like just a generic 2-drop unit, and then like a bad 2-card, whatever it is, and then siege provisions. And I was like, well,
Okay.
I want my combat tricks a little more. It's still kind of keeping it in my deck. Like I have the same amount.
You got it in your hand
Yeah.
now. I mean, looking pretty good here. So okay. Yeah, I don't know. I was just curious about that. So we've got 2 known like future threats here, or 3 even, I guess. Like the 3/3 and the Waystone Gate, right? Like both have a lot of power investment and then become game-ending threats eventually. And then we got this chump blocker / silence, silence next turn threat in the rectifier here. The life totals, I mean, we're obviously the aggressor so far this game. Makes sense being with this low to the ground, super aggressive Rakano deck you're playing. I mean, my initial thought is, can we ace base here? And obviously our Steely comes away quite sad if we do that. However, is the opponent even sadder, right? Their life total is quite low already. And if, ace basing here, we lose the Steely, they end up chumping. So we actually like only really probably get in for 3 damage by doing that. So, like that's not extremely appealing to me here, but it's something I'm considering. So, not the 3/3 takes 8 for that to activate. Rectifier is 3, right, for the corrupted on it.
2.
It's only 2. Okay. So like next turn they're probably just gonna be looking to pay 2 for the rectifier and like develop the Waystone or something like that for a turn. Because I mean, it looks like if they're playing this rectifier here to silence your 6/8, I feel like they're already kind of I want to say desperate, but I mean that thing attacking this turn with Berserk would have been devastating. So I get why they wanted to just go ahead and snap that silence off. So I mean, I'm definitely liking attacking with the 3/2 and the 6/8 minimally here. I like obviously you have the option here to play the siege provisions and activate it. And that's a pretty compelling option, to be honest. That would let the Steely get in here too. Then they'd probably block. Yeah, that's looking pretty good here. I'm having trouble deciding between developing a little further, just playing this 2/3 out here, and then like that would mean I can play the provisions as well this turn, and then just have provisions activation next turn. This is a tricky turn here.
That's why I picked it.
I know. It's perfect. I'm not worried at all about this silence. It's not going to get to chump again, so like that's not a concern here. It's really just, do I develop or do I attack while keeping my Steely here?
While you're making that decision, let's go to Alex.
Okay.
Like John was just like working up all the like possible things you could do. So what I would do here, I play the siege provisions. I don't do endure. I activate it on the 1/3, and I ace space.
Yeah.
My logic being, I don't want him to be able to, or her to be able to, gang block my 8/10 and kill it, because after that I don't have anything big enough to get through the big units, and I don't want him to be able to, or her, sorry again, to be able to play the giant and then activate on the 3/3 and make that also an 8/8, because then I think it's game over. So I want to clear his board a little bit, and if you A-space that way, he has to block, because if not, he's just at too low of life. You get a trigger. I feel he would or she would block the 3-2 with the 3-3 in that case, to not go to 2, right? And then you don't really care about the trample that you're not going to be getting if they want to silence it. Overwhelm. So I think
I don't even
that's
have you on the show. Gosh.
right, dude. So that's my line, and that's why. Like, I think I don't want their big units to come out, or basically, I think the game's over, because even with my siege provisions, the 8-10 wouldn't be able to attack through that stuff. If so, I don't know. That's what I think I would do.
So this is a prime example of identifying that we're very much the beatdown, and I like your play of taxing our opponent's resources. In most cases, I normally favor developing the board, because going wider definitely benefits more aggressive decks. But I think you're right. It was John's last play, and it's exactly what you said. I like being able to attack with all three, which means you're going to guarantee getting in some damage. You're going to guarantee drawing a unit with a handful of battle skills, because right now the Steely Stranger was attacking, and we haven't drawn anything with additional battle skills. And spoiler alert, the card we drew had like 7 battle skills on it. But
that reminded me. I remember that. It was something busted.
Yeah, it was a blade crafter, but I digress.
That's right.
Anywho, so I think here the benefit here is because if you do the play where we buff because you have 2 options, right? You can either buff the Steely Stranger, get him with 3 units, and have the trade of the Mark Maker, which I think is 100% fine. And then you can also buff the Mark Maker and just attack with 2 or 3 units anyways. And if they want to take I feel like they would just take the 1 off the Steely Stranger, but if they really wanted to get the Steely Stranger off the board, then they're going to have to take somewhere like 5 damage. There's a couple options, but yeah, I think the best way to tax our opponent, the good thing is that they're going to be choked on power next turn, right? Because if they block with the Rectifier, that's 2 power that they're going to eat up next turn if they really want to silence something. If they want to activate Waystone, they're going to have to activate it twice next turn, and it's not going to give them the Giant, so you don't have to worry about that. And then they're 3 turns or 3 power away from activating the 3/3. I forgot the Guardian. So I think taxing their resources as much as possible is the correct way to win this game. And yeah, so my play would, and I believe, I'm almost positive that's exactly what I did, was play the siege provisions, pump the Steely Stranger, and attack with all 3. So they took a minimum of 3 here, and their best line would be to chump block the Rectifier with the 6/8 with the Rectifier, and then trade the Guardian with the Mark Maker, which still gives us the Overwhelm, which makes our combatant that much better, because a 7/8 Overwhelm is with a siege provisions is really solid. So yeah, and that's what we end up doing, and they actually did take the trade. They did exactly that. They chump blocked with the Rectifier because they realized they were at 14, they couldn't afford to take a huge hit, and they ended up taking 3 there, going to 11. There is an argument, though, I will say that, where you can play siege, you can attack and make them like, okay, maybe they have a trick and maybe they do something, then post combat playing the Storyteller and the siege provisions, so then the following turn you have another attacker and siege provisions. But there's also a world where they don't make the trade there, so they'll still have a 3/3 they could block 2 of your units. So that's the line I would take. I like much for everything what Alex says. It taxes their life total and their resources. Okay, John, going back to you, what's your final decision?
Yeah, what you guys said totally reminded me. Like, I did look at the screenshot for a moment before we started earlier, and I was like, I had totally decided then, like, yeah, I just pump the Stranger and attack. And I, like, when I tried to big brain myself here, I kind of was second guessing myself, but like that,
you're like, it was too obvious.
Yeah, no, that
happens to me all the time.
That's definitely what I would do here as well, for all the reasons you guys stated. Yeah, you're basically forcing them to just go ahead and cash in this 3/3 here, and then like they're so short on cards, like they may just spend all of next turn developing this Waystone Gate, and if they don't do that, they play like 1 blocker and still just get completely run over by your siege provisions with now Overwhelm from your from the Mark Maker thing. So yeah, I agree completely with this play.
Now, the flip side to that, just playing once again devil's advocate, I think it would completely change the dynamic if they had one activation already on the Waystone Gate and next turn they would get the 8/8. That would completely change this. I'm not going to go in depth into it because I think we've already talked about this one enough. But yeah, that could definitely, knowing that they're going to get an 8/8 that we have no way of dealing with except with one unit that they could just, double block with, is a consideration and stuff. But once again, you play with what you got and you hedge the best you can. I do think it's funny though that because of where the aggressive deck, like none of us cared at all about a combat trick. Like they could have easily had Defile or Seer here, and we're just like, yeah, whatever. I mean, granted, if they had Defile, they would have probably already taken out the Berserker. But it's just funny that you're like, we're the aggressor. If they got it, they got it. That's great. We're still swinging.
Yep.
Show it to me if you got it.
Yep. All right, sweet. That was the What's the Play. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And once again, realize that these are going to be going up in article formats on Eternal Warcry if you're a more visual person. That was fun. I like that one. Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, that was a good.
Okay, that's going to do it for What's the Play, which is going to take us into our Constructed Corner, which I want to start off by saying shout out to Collector, big fan of the show. Actually, I have no idea if he listens to the show. He was on the show, though, so that matters.
Contributor to the show, anyway.
Yeah, there you go. And very active player in the community, hangs out on Twitch with us all the time. Great dude, absolutely great dude. Winning,
hey, Brad,
taking down the ECQ, like took it
Congrats.
Down. Brewed up a deck with the Barbarian Camp, Skycrag, big Skycrag, and just piloted it masterfully. I gotta say, at least the games I watched, it was just it was like it just on point. So
he was a juggernaut.
He's a clean player.
Yeah.
No jacks below the belt when Collector's on, in the game.
Okay. Sweet. Congratulations, Collector. Congratulations to John Holio. We talked about it earlier at the beginning of the show, but John Holio definitely, once again, with his own brew, made it today too, like a champion. So we're going to be talking about his deck today, and you guys could give it a shot if you like. Let me break it down for you very quickly. 4 Crack the Earth, 4 Nahid's Faithful, 2 Seek Power, 4 Blightmoth, 2 Devour, 4 High Prophet of Soul, 4 Vara's Favor, 4 Worthy Cause, 3 Banish, 2 Dizzo Cabal Rocketeer, 1 Marionette Cross, 3 Impending Doom, 4 Incarnus Makar's Listener, 2 Carvit Redeemed, 1 Aramat's Machinations, 1 Ikaria First Reaper, 3 Carvit Solar Dragon, 2 Vara Fate Touched, 8 Shadow Sigil, 5 Time Sigil, 4 Emblem of Makar, 4 Seed of Mystery, 4 Xenon Insignia, and a market consisting of Arc of Soul, Draconic Ire, Grodov's Burden, Makar Stranger, and a Marsh Dragon. John, without further ado, do your thing, brother.
So yeah, this was a fun deck. I put it together. The day before. It was a fun deck for me. I put it together. I think the day before the event, I was brewing so many different decks to try to figure out what was best for the meta and for the weekend, and it was between this one and a couple others. And I don't know necessarily that this was the strongest, but I chose to play this one because the gameplay felt so similar to me to the Cultist deck that I played in Expedition ECQ a few months back. So like to me, this is basically Z and Cultist again. As far as like the gameplay patterns and just things like that, it just felt very similar to me. Obviously, like there's some major differences, like as far as you can't have it anymore and things like that. But the game plan is still pretty similar to that old deck, which is basically, ideally you can ramp into, some of your big threats, which are just nicely statted units, which, obviously everyone was expecting Jack to be a big player this weekend. So anything with more than 4 health, it was just going to be prioritized here. And we have a lot of units like that in Shadow. And they did their jobs in that regard. There's also so basically the game plan, it was basically ramp into big units and then like sustain that. And then if your plan gets interrupted by a bunch of removal or things like that, you have VAR to kind rebuild really quickly or just close out the game. And Aramot's Machinations as a one of kind of to do a similar job, but maybe a little earlier in the game than or maybe even play it once Far's in play to just completely flood the board with units. The removal is basically Worthy Cause and Banish, which is like a little light on removal, but these Blight Moths end up doing so much work. Like they basically hard carried me in the day one portion. Like against aggro, these Blight Moths were just so good. And like as far as the differences between this version and the old Cultist, like Blight Moth is basically Gargoyle, except it's like in a lot of ways better. I can
totally agree with that.
It can just like that one card on its own can just devastate an opponent's board if they're like an early aggressive or like tribal focused deck, like Praxis Stranger style or something like that. Yeah, these Blight Moths were just so good. They're good for keeping you alive in the early game. They're good for devastating board. They're good for sacrificing. They just kind of do it all. Comboing Blight Moths with like just a ping from Avar's Favor can often kill a unit. If that's kind of what you need. These two of Dizo were really good against the Tota Pioneers because Tota Pioneer is just a one attack unit. So Dizo can take that for 4 mana. You play the Dizo and can steal those. And at that point, like anytime I would steal a unit with Dizo with this deck, I'm basically looking to just kind of cash it in because it's kind of a liability. Holding onto that unit for multiple turns, as useful as it is to have a Tota Pioneer, you basically just want to either sacrifice it or like suicide attack it into their board. Like you just want to. It's basically a removal spell, Dizo here. Like occasionally you can just run away. Like I stole a Linrace Stranger, I think once or twice with the Dizo, and like it was just unanswered, and that kind of let me run away with the game in a way. So like occasionally you can kind of do that, but for the most part you're looking to play Dizo in a way that lets you actually kill whatever unit you're stealing as soon as possible. What else we got here? Ikaria is a one of, like not having the influence to play her or just 6 power, it feels so bad. So you never want multiple of these in your hand. If it's already in your void, you can just get it back at the right time once you're recurring things with VAR, for example. So I think one of was fine. Between the two Carvets, like it's kind of like a curve consideration more for having those Carvet redeems in there. It's just like Solar Dragon Carvet is just so good with Vara. I wanted to play 4 of those, but just playtesting with the redeemed version, it's just so good in the meta and like to help with the curve out.
Helps with influence.
and like that's the only, like I ended up having red influence in so many games. I ended up just running Ire in the market because I also found myself not ever grabbing any, that card I had in that slot was never getting pulled out of the market anyway. So it was like a free market slot. So that actually won me a game or two as well. And then Incarnus, like, I don't know. I don't know about you guys, but I hadn't really given Incarnus much of a shot because of so much salvo. But like, I don't know, man. After playtesting with her a bit, the number of times an Incarnus Winvoke would literally win me the game was so stupid high still. And like, because she just replaces herself with that situationally amazing card that you probably get, in the majority of your games, like you don't care that she gets salvoed. Like it just doesn't matter. In fact, you're just happy that they're spending removal on this card that already replaced itself with something better for the most part. Like I don't know, the choices Incarnus gives you in these games is always so good. I don't know what your experience is, but she's so good.
Oh yeah, for sure. I almost ran her in my previous Stone Scar deck, honestly, because of that. But that time it was pre salvo nerf, so it was still pretty predominant. And I said the exact same thing. I'm like, worst case scenario, she gets you a card. Granted, you are going down on tempo because they're spending 1 power to get rid of your turn 4, but
it is a tempo loss, but like this deck, it's top end, right? You don't really, that middle game, you're just kind of buying yourself time for the most part.
The other thing I really actually that did some work for me when it comes to Incarnus is the unblockable. There were a handful of times where I won games off of her just not being blocked. and just getting in there, and then heaven forbid. Granted, I probably want to say, being real, she probably only hit her second or her mastery twice.
That's about what it was for me too. Like that wasn't going for with Incarnus. I mean, it's just the first card and some chip damage.
Yeah, and then if she invoked a good weapon to throw on her, man, that was such a clock.
Yeah, and like because she replaced herself, you have no fear attacking. Like there was a lot of, for example, lightning strike going around over the weekend, and so like Dizo's unblockable too, but you're not just attacking with Dizo because he needs to stay alive so you can keep holding that unit hostage, right? And you're just attacking Dizo into lightning strike. You care a lot about that, and it was only for 1 damage. Like that's never worth it in this meta that weekend. But in Incarnus, you just get in there, right? She already did her job literally just when you play her. She's basically like, in this deck, she's just shadow card draws. Like that is just, she's just for the Winvoke, literally, and just any chip damage she gets in was just gravy, right? You're basically just trying to control and win the game with your overstated flyers.
Yep.
With this deck, and for me, it got there. Like some games it just felt unstoppable. Like when you can just ramp with crack and high profit, you just ramp straight out into like a Carvet or something, or an Icaria. A lot of decks are just not going to be able to win from that position, and that happens so early in some games. Like that, it always feels great when the deck does that, but unfortunately, like I think the weakness to shadow decks in the format in general is just sustain and things, in general. So if you draw some of these pieces in the wrong order, you might just not get there in that given game. Like I think mulligans with this deck are extremely important, and like. But I prioritize the ability to ramp, and ramp and control, and or just like, do I have 1 or 2 Blight Moths in my opening hand was basically what I was looking for the weekend as far as mulligans.
Yep.
This deck it plays on ladder. It's playable. It was tweaked and built for the weekend tournament, but if you want to give it a spin on ladder, I think it's fine. I don't, I think you could probably, get to masters with the deck, but if you like the play style, I would recommend it. Some people are just we're so sick of cultists from that being the meta a few months ago that they don't want to see this deck ever. And I understand that completely, but yeah, it got me, I found success with it, for this ECQ for sure.
Thanks for
I wish you
that.
had too, Jedi. I'm really sorry you didn't with your run with the deck.
It's all right. I blame myself.
It was a tricky one.
I just didn't get enough reps with the deck. That's all.
And like this, it's light on removal and it's high on like decision points. So this is a tricky deck, and like if you didn't have the reps in, and like I just kind of felt like I had a huge head start, like I said, because it was similar in play, like gameplay, to that cultist deck I had so much experience with. I almost felt like I was cheating, right? Like I felt like I'd been playing the deck for months. I just picked it up. So
thanks for sharing, man. Once again, congrats on a day 2 birth, man. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll have Alex talking about one of his decks eventually, now that he's starting to snip into Constructed a little bit, just a smidge.
Yeah, and I hope I can share some of these other ones that I worked on for this event on our future podcast over the next few weeks. While the format is still what it is, and I don't think there's going to be any other big tournaments in the expedition format in the way it is. So like, I don't think there's any reason not to just share the rest of these decks, right? Like for competitive secrecy or anything like that. Just get them out there so people can enjoy them.
Well, where you can definitely share the decks at? It's our Discord. That's right. You can check out John's decks in our various channels on our Discord. Link down below, where John, as well as a bunch of other great Constructed players like Sokka, Dub Mike, and Pook85 can help you create decks and just do a great job of it. Honestly, we're a fantastic community we have there. Just all great things. I can't speak enough about the Discord. I think the only thing that comes close to how good our Discord is how fantastic our Twitch stream is, or chat.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah. The other day, Pachi and I were in there working on that Expedition Aurelian like temporal control deck, putting our heads together. So yeah, that one's in there right now.
Yeah,
a fresh brew.
That was the one I actually wanted to run, but then you told me like, it's not the best position. I have the 3 decks.
Well,
so.
and like that, if you started at the time you started, there would have been like a 0% chance you finished on time with that deck. 0%. Like I finished like my last of the 28 games basically at the buzzer with this cultist deck, and like I think the average game with that control deck would have been at least 10 more minutes, like minimum. So
maybe I was swapped like 1 card for a Pit of Lanakta or something.
Well, I think the current version we have on Discord does have a Pit in it. So
boom, sold. Look at that. See, I would have got there anyways. I was ahead of the curve. All right. Mentioned you can also check out videos on YouTube. youtube.com/EternalJourney. Check out the video version of this podcast if you're a more visual person, as well as various draft videos, sealed videos, constructed videos, deck techs, and ECQ runs. Check it out there. Twitch.tv/Jedi_EJs, where you can catch the 3 of us live every Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, doing all kinds of great things. So come hang out, talk to us, let us know what you think about the decks that John brews or my whack draft decisions and all kinds of great things like that. And just let Alex know what a great drafter he is. YouTube, Discord, and charity event. That's right. We are doing a charity tournament to benefit Child's Play. The charity, they purchase game consoles and give age appropriate games to children that are in intensive care, terminal care in various hospitals. They're like, they can't leave the hospital. They're getting treatment for terminal illnesses, and so it kind of makes their time there a little more bearable and whatnot. So it's kind of nerds supporting other nerds. Definitely check it out. There's gonna be a link down below where you're free to contribute, and once again, free to join the tournament. It is a common and uncommon only format, so no campaigns and no invocation or win vote cards, conjurings. So the barrier of entry is extremely low. Brew a deck, come in to Discord, talk about various decks you want to try, find people to playtest with, and just have a good time. If you're not a player, definitely tune into the stream where we're going to be broadcasting it. It's going to be a fun tournament. It was a ton of fun last time we did it, and I think this one's going to be even better. We have the entire Eternal Journey crew helping us put it together, a fantastic and smooth show for you, so definitely check it out.
For those of you who aren't big brewers out there, there was some great decks that came out of our last Peasant tournament. So I think if you just search Peasant in the deck name on Warcry, you'll probably come up with some or most of those for some inspiration.
Yep. Yeah, very true. The top 8, I think I put the top 8. I don't remember if it was the top 16. But
yeah, and just some other people posted their decks that they brewed up just that didn't do so hot or whatever, necessarily. And then I don't even know if like our guy, what Camel Milk was winning and then had to leave. Like, did his even make it?
Oh yeah, you're right. Camel
right?
Milk
I don't even
flexing
remember,
with the 05 and being like, all right, thanks guys, I'm out.
Yeah. So, but yeah, if you just search for Peasant, that should pull up format legal decks that have already been brewed for some inspiration.
Another thing you can do as well is just take your favorite draft deck. If you had a draft deck that you thought was a lot of fun, just take it, multiply it, make it 4 of everything, and bam, there you go. Give that a shot.
That's probably a good starting place for a lot of people. Yeah.
Yep. All right, guys, that is going to do it for us. Of course, you can catch those 2 great gentlemen in all the places I just tagged, as well as the From Eternal Discord, and then occasionally John's stream. Now that the internet's working better. And of course, another benefit of joining the Discord is the fact that you can also sneak in some secret streams there. Sometimes John and Alex and some of the other players like Dire Snow will get on there and stream. So definitely tune into that as well, where you can just conversate, have a bunch of co-op drafts, and have a good time with a bunch of friends over the weekend. That's gonna do it, guys. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed this level up show. Let us know in the comments down below if you got something out of this, and what kind of deck you're gonna be brewing for the charity event. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time, and as always, happy gaming.
Bye.
Good luck in your draft queues, everyone.